Hey everybody, what's going on? And hope you guys are having a good day and welcome to Guns N' Roses Central. And I want to give a big shout out to Jeff, who has been on my podcast a couple times. He actually gave me the idea for this video, and he's the one who actually sent me the links. So as you guys know, Izzy Stradlin was jamming with the guys from Velvet Revolver before they even had a band name and before they even had a singer. So this photo you see is from one of the rehearsals back in probably 2002 or so. And even in Slash's book, he said that they recorded some stuff. They were actually going to have Izzy maybe come in the band, maybe be the singer, but of course it didn't end up that way. And then Jeff was nice enough to send me these two songs. So there's a song by Velvet Revolver on their first album called Do It for the Kids, and that album was released in 2004. And then Izzy's got a song on one of his solo albums that came out back in 2005 called Bomb. And the riffs sound really similar. Like I've linked to them down below. I want you guys to go listen to them and let me know if you think the main riffs sound really similar. Maybe that was a song they were working on back in 2002 or so, and maybe Izzy remembered it and maybe just used it for his actual solo record. Now, the actual songs themselves around the riff sound quite different, but I think that they definitely sound very similar. And you guys may be wondering, well, why didn't Izzy actually join Velvet Revolver? So we'll get to that in a second, but let's talk about a song that Velvet Revolver got sued for plagiarism and actually lost. So there's this UK band called Voodoo 6. They released a song back on their 1999 album Real World called Cyber Babe. And Velvet Revolver released a song on their debut album Contraband called Dirty Little Thing. So apparently Cyber Babe and Dirty Little Thing sound very similar. I've never been able to find a copy of their song Cyber Babe anywhere on the internet. If you guys can find a copy and let me know, I'd love to be able to listen to it. But apparently, here's the story. So according to one of the band members from Voodoo 6, a couple of years back, a mate of mine in LA called me to say he'd heard what he thought was my song on the radio and that he had been a bit shocked when he realized it was Velvet Revolver. When I checked it out myself, I genuinely couldn't believe it because it wasn't as if it was close. It was basically the same riff. So in the end, Velvet Revolver had to sign over 20% of the royalties for their song Dirty Little Thing to Tony Newton, who is the bassist from the UK rock band Voodoo 6, who I guess had written the song. So let's talk now about Izzy and why he didn't join Velvet Revolver back in the day. And, in 2003, Duff and Slash actually explained why Izzy is not part of the new band. So, they were jamming, and then one day, this was around 2002, Izzy just showed up and, he wanted to just check out what was going on. And he actually was pretty adamant about going on tour right away. Izzy said, I've got 8 songs. Let's go. We'll do some covers. Duff and I will sing. But Matt and Slash and Duff were along the lines of, if we're going to do this, we're going to have to do it so it's amazing. And basically, I don't think Izzy wanted to deal with the lead singer. According to Slash, Izzy he was so effing shattered from his experience with Axl Rose that he refuses to ever do anything involving a singer again. And he said they also said that Izzy's sometimes a guy who's sort of there and sort of not there. And they've seen Izzy periodically throughout the last several years, and even during the times that he had left Guns N' Roses. So I've linked to the article down below if you guys want to actually read it. And even in Slash's book, they talked about how Izzy wanted to just rent a van and go play a bunch of small venues. And even in Slash's book, he said that he wasn't sure if Izzy was joking or not. But I also want to talk about some other songs that may share some similarities in the Guns N' Roses universe. One of Guns N' Roses' biggest hits, Sweet Child of Mine, was in the news a couple of years ago because there was parts of it that sounded similar to another song that came out before Sweet Child of Mine called Unpublished Critics, which was written by an Australian band named Australian Crawl in 1981. So this was in the news back in 2015 before the Guns N' Roses reunion was actually announced. And basically, if you listen to both songs, which I've linked to down below, it does sound a bit similar. According to the article, the same chugging chord progression, a similarly sweeping lead break, and the verse melody, and an elongated one-syllable vocal in the chorus. But there were also some pretty big differences between the songs. First of all, the Unpublished Critics song actually lacks the Slash-defining riff. The chord progression is not the same in the chorus, and it does not have Where Do We Go Now section that comprises of the song's second half. So if you guys have ever wondered how these lawsuits actually work with, stealing someone else's song, one of the main criteria for providing plagiarism is that the complainant would have to show that the defendant had access to the original song. So while Australian Crawl saw 2 of 4 albums released between 1980 and 1985 hit the #1 charts in Australia, they really weren't that popular in the US. However, their lone US album, a 1984 compilation on Geffen Records, which also happened to be Guns N' Roses' label, called Semantics Included Unpublished Critics. So according to Q Magazine, the writing of Sweet Child of Mine happened rather quickly. Slash was killing time playing the stupid little riff, according to the article, and other members liked it and fashioned the rest of the song around it. But even then, it wasn't entirely original. Axl Rose claimed that his main influence came from a different source. Axl said, "I'm from Indiana where Leonard Skinner are considered God to the point that you end up saying, 'I hate this effing band,'" he said. "And yet for Sweet Child, I went out and got some old Skinner tapes to make sure that we got that heartfelt feeling." So if you guys want to read the entire article, it's down below in the description box. So the other song off Appetite that shares some similarities with some other songs is Paradise City. Now, the guitarist for the band Hanoi Rocks, which was a huge influence to Guns N' Roses, claims that the riff from Paradise City is just a slower version of the riff of their song Lost in the City. And as you guys know, Axl's often cited Hanoi Rocks as Guns N' Roses' biggest influence. And Hanoi Rocks' rhythm guitarist Nasty Suicide can also be seen in the music video for Paradise City. And the style of the main riff in Paradise City has also been used by many former Guns N' Roses members in new projects. This can be seen in Izzy Stradlin's song, which we talked about earlier, Bomb, and Velvet Revolver's Do It for the Kids. And according to Tracy Guns of LA Guns and former member Guns N' Roses, the riff from Paradise City was influenced by the Black Sabbath song Zero the Hour from the Born Again album. I've linked to it down below, and if you listen to it, there definitely are some similarities. And then after Chinese Democracy came out, Guns N' Roses were sued by Ulrich Snauss for basically using some of his music on the song Riyadh and the Bedouins. So apparently the song features samples of unlicensed chunks of a couple tracks by the German composer. Now it's thought that the actual tracks were actually brought to Axl by Chris Pittman. And if you guys remember, Chris Pittman left Guns N' Roses before the reunion shows and then sued Axl Rose for unpaid money. And some people believe that Axl was pissed off at Chris Pittman because he's the one who brought those unlicensed chunks of Ulrich Snauss's songs to the band and really didn't tell them that this was somebody else's songs or made them believe that he had gotten permission to actually use these samples, and that ended up costing Guns N' Roses about $1 million. So we also want to talk a bit about Coldplay. They were inspired by Sweet Child of Mine as well. So they had released a single a couple of years ago called Adventure of a Lifetime. So Chris Martin was doing an interview, and he said he'd been begging his guitarist for years to make a riff that he liked as much as Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses. And then his guitarist came up with the riff for Adventure of a Lifetime, and Chris Martin actually really liked it. So if you guys want to listen to the song, I've linked to it down below. It doesn't really sound like Sweet Child of Mine at all, but I think they're just trying to go for that signature riff in the actual song. So go check it out, guys, and let me know what your thoughts are. Let's talk now about a band that has been accused of ripping off Guns N' Roses, and this didn't really come to light until probably a month or two ago. So the band The Pretty Reckless recorded a song called Oh My God, and they released it about 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, and it sounds somewhat similar to the Guns N' Roses song Oh My God. I don't know if I've ever heard two songs with the same name that one isn't a cover of the other that actually sound really similar. And if you guys want to go check it out, I've linked to it down below. And if you guys know, The Pretty Reckless opened for Guns N' Roses back in 2011. There's a photo of the lead singer with Axl and with DJ Ashba. So go listen to the songs. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are. So what do you think of the Velvet Revolver and the Izzy Stradlin solo track? I think they sound quite similar. And listen to the Sweet Child of Mine one and listen to the Pretty Reckless one and let me know what your guys' thoughts are. So that does it for today's video, guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed that video, and make sure you subscribe to my channel for the latest Guns N' Roses news, and be sure to like me on Facebook and Twitter. My social media links are down below. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Wanted to do something a little bit different now that Guns N' Roses is not on tour and I got to fill the time with something else. So thanks for watching, guys, and take care.